Welcome everyone, Christine here with my tier list for the Greenskin Legendary Lords after the Greenskin rework in Omens of Destruction DLC patch 6.0. Things have certainly changed quite a bit for the Greenskins. Their economy has gotten worse, but they have gained instead more unit variety, in particular with regards to orcs. The addition of the Savage Orc Great Shaman has certainly changed their campaign quite a bit, because now you have a magical army leader that also can buff your orc infantry, all of your orc infantry, in terms of both leadership and physical resistance. And this does change the playstyle of Greenskins in a fairly substantial way. As do other things, right? Like the availability of units, the new addition of Mangler Squigs and Colossal Squigs, just the benefits that Squigs have gotten with this particular DLC and the 6.0 patch has opened up new possibilities that didn't exist before, as well as the improvements to both Wurrzag and in particular Skarsnik. Now, here are the things I care about when I'm rating a campaign. I care about campaign variety. If I'm replaying a campaign, specifically replayability, if I'm playing a campaign over and over and over again, am I going to be able to do things differently? Am I going to have choices? Are there going to be consequences for those choices? What is the kind of unit variety I will have access to in a campaign? Does the campaign have unique mechanics? And if they do have unique mechanics, do those unique mechanics work in a very good way? Unfortunately for Greenskins, the campaigns that actually do have unique mechanics kind of fall short, really, in a lot of ways. At least at the moment. So at number 6, we have Grom the Punch. Now, to be clear, Greenskin Legendary Lords, or Greenskins, don't have the same situation as, say, the Empire, where you have a campaign like Marcus Wolfart, who's genuinely inferior to all other Imperial campaigns, or a campaign like Teclis for the High Elves, which is like just a complete pain to bother with, or other campaigns for other races. All Greenskin campaigns do work and can provide a fairly interesting experience, but some I do feel are better than others. They do give you that better sense of playability. They do push you to get outside your comfort zone. They give you a set of options that you wouldn't otherwise have. And this is why Grom is at number 6. You start with the tier 1 settlement over here in Massive Orcal in Bretonnia, in unpleasant climate. So already those are significant limitations, and not in a good way. I tend to take the view that you can make a campaign hard, but how you make something hard is important. For the record, Grom's campaign is not hard. It's at worst frustrating because of the limitations you have because of climate, because you only have one settlement over here that doesn't even have that many building slots compared to, say, something like freaking Skaven Blight in a campaign. Like, say what you will about Ikagla's starting position, which, by the way, isn't great either, but at least he has a mega settlement over here in Skaven Blight. Grom doesn't even have that. And he starts with the tier 1 settlement, so that's already a lot of limitations from the beginning of a campaign, which makes a campaign less interesting. On top of that, the way you would make Grom's campaign work, and one substantial change, is you would recruit Goblin Archers, which you could do from any settlement. But now, you can no longer do that in a Greenskin campaign. You can only recruit Goblins and Squigs, and say what you will about Squig herds. They're not really worth recruiting on their own, unless you get some significant buffs elsewhere, like Hero, Research, Scrap, etc. They can pay off, but they're just not really worth it in the beginning. You do have power through the Cauldron, to be sure, but the Cauldron itself, the way you unlock things like, go fight, sack a Dark Elf settlement when there's no Dark Elf settlements nearby. Go out of your way to do that. Go out of your way to sack an Imperial settlement when you might not want to enter in a war with an Empire. Just creates a kind of situation where you're doing things in a campaign that you're only doing to unlock these things, not because it makes sense in your campaign to do so. And the payoff doesn't necessarily feel worthwhile, because other factions, other good legendary lords for other races may get significant benefits without having to do something like that. And that is one of the problems with Grom. Furthermore, because of the climate situation, yeah, you can have a blast conquering wolf one, but just like Nakari has a one-dimensional campaign where you play once or twice, you conquer Wolf one, that's a lot of fun, it's a challenge, it's interesting because, yeah, High Elves are very strong to deal with when the AI is controlling them, especially the golden trio of Tyrion, Alarion, and Alfarian, who do all hate you. While that is certainly a compelling situation in a campaign early on, you realize the replayability is not especially great. Because once you deal with Wolf 1, there's not really all that much you can do. You're very far away from all other Greenskin Legendary Lords. You're far away from the core Greenskin territory, so landmark situation, less variety with respect to that, less variety with respect to climate. Combine that with the fact that you end up, yeah, I can conquer a massive island in the middle of the map, but all the climate surrounding that island is unpleasant. And this wasn't necessarily a big issue when the Greenskins were significantly more powerful from an economic standpoint. The fact that you could get both the regular income building and the sacking and looting settlements, as well as the cost of these buildings, made it workable. Like, that's how ridiculous Greenskins were before, especially with Grom, who can literally print money through the ocean clams. But certainly the nerfs to the economy combined with Grom's issues that he's had since day one, you just made it work before, have really made this campaign far less compelling to play. You can still make it work and can still be fun, but I just don't think it has the staying power compared to all other Greenskin Legendary Lord campaigns. Because every other Greenskin Legendary Lord campaign has more variety in climate, more variety in replayability, more options, and better starts. Certainly, the Cauldron is a powerful mechanic. It should be pointed out that the Hag that gives you a lot of benefits to the Cauldron may also be bugged at the moment. And I don't believe the 6.02 hotfix actually addresses that. So Grom needs better climate, he needs a better starting situation. Bretonnia in itself is a pretty bad area regardless of which race you're playing as, except like Karl Franz, and that's just because you can easily conquer Bretonnia as opposed to dealing with the Electricon stuff. Like, there's a lot of tangible benefits in Karl Franz's campaign going Bretonnia, or you can ignore it. That's great. Like, you can go in Bretonnia with all the downsides that come from the way Bretonnia is designed on the map. You can go in Bretonnia and make it work, or you can spend your entire time in the Empire. That's what makes Karl's campaign good, because you have those kind of choices. Here, yeah, you have some mountains if you want to end up at war with Durfu early on in your campaign, and he can recruit Trikin, and you've got Goblin Archers. Enjoy that particular situation. I just don't think it really pans out in the end. It used to, but it was already in a danger zone, and I think we've reached the tipping point with regards to Omens of Destruction. Some updates are in order. The way you access certain things in the Cauldron, the way you use the Cauldron, the terrain of Bretonnia, very important. Like, Skulltaker's campaign, for instance, really sucks, in large part because he starts in freaking Lustria, which is not conducive for a Khorne campaign in particular, because of the fact Khorne is actually incentivized to raise settlements, and it's one of the very few factions that is incentivized to do so, unlike the vast majority of other factions in the game. Again, you can make it work. It can be fun, but from my point of view, it's the least interesting Greenskin campaign to play at the moment. But if they were to fix up Bretonnia, if they were to fix up Grom's starting situation, that would be better. I think it is pretty telling about Grom that out of all the Greenskin Legendary Lords, he is the one most guaranteed to die. There's very few campaigns I've played in this game where Grom survived on his own, unless I somehow had an impact on that situation, like, say, playing Ekeclaw, or playing Karl Franz, or playing Kemmler. There's very, very few situations where you see Grom, controlled by the AI, on any difficulty, surviving in his campaign situation, unlike everyone else. Skarsnik may die a lot of times, but he can also win a lot of times as well in his campaign. Whereas, yeah, Grom, Musalan, and even Kemmler have issues with that. Though Kemmler has a decent amount of survivability compared to others, or at least staying power, suffice to say, even if in the long term he'll lose to the blob of the Order type, because he ends up being isolated after Musalan and Grom are eliminated, and yeah, he just falls surrounded on all sides by enemies. At number 5, it is Gorbad Ironclaw. To be clear, I think Gorbad is actually a good Legendary Lord in terms of his Lord effects, in terms of his special skill line, and in terms of his starting situation where he can take Karakay peaks after the end of turn 1. that opens up a whole lot of possibilities. So from a campaign starting situation, from a climate situation, from the choices you have in a campaign that come naturally, it is pretty good. The reason he is so low on this list is because his unique mechanic doesn't work. So effectively, the way I see Gorbad is that for the most part, outside of his Lord effects and special skill line, you're kind of playing a generic Lord, or as close to a generic Legendary Lord as you can get when you're playing the Greenskins at the moment. And I find that a huge disappointment. I don't hate this campaign. In fact, I've had a lot of fun playing this campaign by literally ignoring his faction, his unique faction mechanics. So the whole plan aspect is just forgettable. The only faction effect that you actually have that's worth using is the global recruitment duration. The increased rewards from WAs, like that might be relevant for the first while you do in a campaign, and after that it loses its relevancy very, very quickly. And yes, that is certainly a problem that CA does need to address. I had hoped with the Greenskin rework that they would change the way WAs work to some extent, maybe make them shorter. I don't know. Or just make the whole system work in a different way. Because, like, the idea that you have a WA that lasts a certain duration and then you either win or fail in that WA is not quite how WAs work in the lore. In the lore, a WA gains momentum and then a Greenskin leader has to keep up that momentum. And when they start losing, that momentum starts disappearing as opposed to what happens right now in the mechanics. So that's one of the things I wish CA had changed if we're talking about the WAs. I don't mind necessarily working the way it is, but it makes this whole faction mechanic kind of pointless. But as for the plan, a lot of people will argue that the plan just has some fine-tuning issues, if they find an issue with it at all. I've played entire campaigns as Gorbad, and I can tell you, I've played campaigns where I flat out ignored it. The vast majority of campaigns, I've literally flat out ignored it, except certain effects that I just gain naturally, like, you know, for instance, Regimental, which is a really, really good effect, or a couple of really good effects in a campaign. Or, in this specific campaign that I did post on YouTube videos on it without, like, any AR mod or anything like that, I found myself going out of my way to get, let me have Wolf Riders in my army to get that extra income from sacking and looting settlements. Let me go with, let me try and build up an army of Savage Orcs and Nasty Skulkers because of a particular plan that you can get there. And it just kind of ends up feeling like fluff. It doesn't feel worthwhile to engage in the system at all, and that's kind of the worst aspect, really. Like, it's one thing to have a bad system that you're forced to engage in. It's another thing when you have a system that you can flat out ignore and still basically play the same campaign. Or even engaging in the system is a waste of your damn time, because it is a waste of your time. Like, consider the situation with Nasty Skulkers, right? Like, an actual useful upgrade. You get Vanguard deployment for Savage Orc units, you get Surprise Savagery for Savage Orc units, and Physical Resistance for Nasty Skulkers. That seems worthwhile. Very much so. Until you realize a couple of issues with just an upgrade like this. And this, by the way, is one of the more powerful upgrades, just worth pointing out. First off, the army leader, because who's going to lead this army? That is a particularly important question. Who's going to lead this army? Is it going to be Goblin Great Shaman who can buff the Nasty Skulkers, going to give you Goblin Tide? Or is it going to be a Savage Orc Great Shaman who can give you all that sweet leadership and physical resistance for Orc infantry units? So regardless, like, you can go in more Nasty Skulkers or go in more Savage Orc Big Guns to be sure, but at least part of these units, because you're supposed to buff both of these units, part of these units are going to end up being meaningless. You're just basically carrying, let's say you go, like, I think it's a far smarter idea to go focus on the Savage Orc aspect. In best case scenario, you're carrying 2 units of Nasty Skulkers in an army, which are not bad units, far from it, but you're carrying them for no real reason except just to unlock this effect. That is not a great campaign system at all. To begin with. And yeah, I did make a mistake putting a Goblin Great Shaman over here. But on top of that, beyond just like the Lord effect, like certain Lords having specific effects for certain units that buff them, like the armor for Goblins or the physical resistance that Savage Orc Great Shaman gives for all Orc units, you also got to consider the following aspect. red skill lines, because a lot of the power units have in a campaign are determined by the skill lines that the Lord has. And consider an army like this, yes, I can fill up to the brim with savage orcs and goblins, but then you have two different upgrades that affect these units. So you end up in a kind of situation where you can't get everything. You gotta pick and choose. Sure, you might get these two skill lines, but then you're missing artillery skill lines, or or if you get the artillery as well, then you're missing other things like the magical skill, the blue skill line, all that. I think at most you want to get two of the, like, usually when you're playing a campaign, you want to get two of these red skills in the army filled up and focus on those units. Typically what I do, I focus on some infantry units that I would use over here, and then I focus on some cavalry or artillery units, dependent on the race I'm playing as. But here, it's like, to make this army really worthwhile, to really get the full benefits over here of missile strength, or rather melee attack, melee defense, ammunition, work, and the orc boys work, I would have to get two skills and then ignore the troll benefits, the mangler squig benefits, the artillery benefits, in order to make that worthwhile. So the idea that you can have this varied playstyle of armies, for the most part, really ends up being side grades at best, if completely pointless at worst. And yes, there are certainly some things that are pointless. Furthermore, there are certain upgrades that are so far ahead of everything else that it's a waste of your resources to not get them. Things like regimental, 10% campaign movement range, 15% upkeep, minus 30% reduction, a vigor loss reduction. Yeah, that is substantially better than anything else you could get. Or getting 25% income from looting and sacking settlements by carrying 3 goblin wolf riders in your army. Though, you honestly, like, it's a significant nerf to your combat potential. Even if you were to get a lot of other upgrades for wolf riders, it's not worth investing on wolf riders. But hey, you want that 25% income for sacking and looting settlements that other legendary lords may have by default? Yeah, enjoy dealing with that. And that's kind of the problem that you do end up having in this specific campaign. Or, oh, the Black Battalion. If you carry 2 orc boys and 2 black orc units in an army, you can get the movable bulwark and unstoppable choppas for all orc infantry units. But the problem is orc boys are completely useless. If it was orc spear boys, yeah, that would be a different situation. You know, your anti-large unit that can get more armor for a particular scrap upgrade, that would work. But regular orc boys, not really a unit I'd bother with. So you end up with these problems, and yeah, the WoW units do not freaking count in that respect. So you end up with these kind of problems where you're supposedly given a lot of variety, but it ends up just being fluff. Because ultimately, things like regimental, things like the things like not drag the battle wagons, but the raiding parties, and another one over here, if you're to get, where is it? I keep forgetting. Yeah, this one, where you can use tunneling stands to engage in battle, so that gives you a lot more campaign movement. These things are so far ahead of everything else that it's pointless. On top of that, it's also constant micromanagement of this system, like your equipping tactics, they expire, you have to equip them again, and this applies to all armies. And yes, I know there is a level 30 skill that you can get, that you naturally get if you get lords to level 30, where they last for infinite duration. But let me just put it like this. By the point you can actually have them last for an infinite duration, your campaign is long over. This is a campaign where I had a lot of fights on Legendary, and I don't have any Lord level 30. Getting a Lord, partly because of the distances you have to cover over here in the balance. So, like, I've actually been spending quite a lot of turns marching around trying to complete my short campaign victory conditions of, you know, securing the entirety of the balance. But also partly just the way leveling works in a game. Like, requiring a level 30 for something like that is just not worthwhile. Yes, you might unlock it on a Lord. The hotfix will help in the sense that you will gain more plans, twice as many plans, from fighting battles with Gorbad. But I also think, like, the way you acquire plans should be different. It shouldn't be like, oh, you fight any battle with Gorbad and you get plans. It should be more intricate than that. It should be like fighting battles in a certain way, or picking up specific challenges or something like that. Like, even Grom, for all his issues in climate and terrain, all that, he has a more engaging system with the cauldron. Even if you end up fighting certain foes just to open the cauldron, at least you do have a better system of engaging with that. And once you open an upgrade to Grom, it's open all the time. Gorbad would be lower on this list if not for the fact Grom has a bad climate situation, starting situation, and a less varied start. So Gorbad has all of those things working out in his favor, but his unique mechanic is genuinely inferior in every way that counts compared to the Cauldron. And don't get me started on the notion that Cauldron is in a good place, because it is not. I'll be honest, Skulltaker being broken as hell in Omens of Destruction, whatever, right? Balancing issues, all that, certain questionable decisions. Gorbad not having a great system at all, or really feeling like a generic lord, that is a huge disappointment as far as I'm concerned over here. Can be a fun campaign, though you might just benefit playing from a Skarsnik campaign if you want to play in this particular area and just confederating Gorbad and using him as a legendary lord, because funnily enough, Skarsnik plays more like Gorbad should than actual Gorbad. We'll get into that in just a moment. And number 4, it is Wurrzag, the Great Green Prophet. And to be certain, the changes that Creative Assembly have made to this campaign in terms of mechanics, in terms of the scrap upgrades for the orcs where you can stack these kind of scrap upgrades, has made this a far more compelling and interesting campaign than it was before. Also, the addition of the Savage Orc Great Shamans through the Omens of Destruction DLC do make a Savage Orc playstyle far more worthwhile, because it kind of wasn't worth using Savage Orcs before. Furthermore, you do get more Shamans than anyone else early on in campaign through a landmark over here in your initial settlement. That also gives you the ability of recruiting rogue idols at tier 3. That is really freaking fun, I'm not gonna lie. That is great. So all these things do work out in Wurrzag's campaign. His unique mechanics, pretty simple, right? You can construct Savage Orc recruitment buildings in any settlement, but Savage Orc settlements do have a special landmark that does also improve your magic further and also gives you +2 recruit rank for Savage Orc units and the diplomatic relations with Greenskins. The one issue, major issue that I have with Wurrzag is that while all of those things are great and do make the campaign substantially better, CA did the one thing they probably shouldn't have. They put this campaign in a jungle. Now, this is far less of an issue for Greenskins than it is for the vast majority of races, because you at least have the tunneling stance, the underway stance. But here's a bit of a problem with that. When they put him over here in the central jungle. To the south, you have Teclis and these lizardmen, but they're probably going to leave you alone. The biggest threat might actually come from the Last Defenders, but you can make an alliance with them work, because while lizardmen don't like Greenskins, they also don't necessarily hate you. So what you end up doing in a Greenskin campaign again and again and again and again when you're playing Wurrzag is that you end up fighting Volkmar for certain. The reason I say Volkmar is because he has a significant level of aversion to you and might as well beat up Manfred. So it's just, you fight tic-tac-toe, you waste your time going through the jungle, recruiting units along the way, dealing with rebellions. You go over here to Khemri, you beat everyone up. And that's kind of what you're going to do every single time in a campaign. And then, yeah, you deal with Forik, you may deal with Krokgar one way or another. The only variety is actually the Krokgar situation, because everyone else, it's like, allying Manfred is not a smart idea, especially because he has territory you actually want. Why would you ally Manfred when you can get the City of Bronze for him? I don't know about you, but I think I want that bloody City of Bronze. That's one of the reasons I would never recommend allying Manfred in the Black Pyramid of Nagash, then Khemri for the gold. So it ends up feeling very samey, regardless of how many times you may play this campaign. There are some choices and variety. I mean, I guess you could always invade the Southern Chaos Wastes and deal with Kairos Fateweaver if you want to play a variant of Teclis' campaign, or at least you would have the underway, so you wouldn't have to actually sail over there. Ugh, Teclis campaign is awful. But yeah, it's not really a very dynamic campaign with a lot of varied approaches, unfortunately, at least from what your ultimate objectives are, which are go north. That is your ultimate objective in this campaign. Head north. Fight everyone along the way, maybe ally a lizardman or two if you want to. Beat up everyone else, because almost everyone else will certainly declare war on you one way or another, or they have stuff that you really, really want to get your hands on. I guess you could ally Cetra. The Tomb Kings, in my from my experience, make really bad allies, just limited armies. And I can tell you the number of times I've allied Katep and had Katep do fuck all in that campaign to actually serve as an ally, so it's not worth it. Like, yeah, Lizardmen are actually much better allies. They actually get shit done if you ally them. Not a great race to play. Allying them, different situation entirely. But yeah, it feels one-dimensional from what you're doing in the campaign, but the actual mechanics of him as a legendary lord, his faction mechanics, the focus of that campaign is great. That's the reason he's higher up there on the list. If I was just counting it based on starting position, it would be much lower, to be clear. Or at least in terms of variety. Though, would it be worse than Grom? I don't think it would be worse than Grom, because at least you have suitable climate surrounding you, unlike poor Grom's situation. Yeah, that's something CA needs to change. So, if you want to understand how CA can easily screw this list around, is like literally just change the climate suitability for Grom. He would shoot up over both Gorbad and Wurrzag, probably. Maybe. I think there would be a debate on the subject of Wurrzag over here. And number 3 is Azhag the Slaughterer, one of the 2 original Greenskin legendary lords added in Warhammer 1. And this might surprise a lot of people, but I do think this campaign has a lot on offer. Yes, there is no unique mechanic, there is no specific special playstyle in this campaign that you can get in other campaigns. To be sure, that is the case. But what Azhag does is give you a lot of variety, both from a diplomatic standpoint and an objective standpoint, and how you accomplish those objectives. I mean, your objectives are to take certain regions of the campaign, like the Northern World Edge Mountains, Ostermark, Kislev, lots of choices in that respect. And here's why I think this campaign works out. It's a couple of things. One, the Empire is suitable climate. Gorbad has the same situation, but Gorbad's unique campaign mechanic is complete fluff. Whereas Azhag gets immunity to vampire corruption, 40 diplomatic relations with vampire counts and Arc in the Black, wins and magic benefits for Lore of Death spells, and hero capacity for Giant River Troll Hags. Oh, and speaking about income from sacking and looting settlements, he also gets a 25% income from sacking settlements. Yeah, one of the plans is a baseline Lord effect for Azhag. I grant you, only for Azhag, but still. You also get wizardly weapons, and he has a giant monster as a mount. He also gets 1 hero capacity for shamans as well, and regeneration. He's actually quite strong in combat. You can make him a caster if you want to. I personally wouldn't bother with that because I don't think it's really worth it, as opposed to his melee skill line on a flying monster. That is a really solid situation for him. But it's not the Lord effects or necessarily the starting location. You start with Gold Mine, you start with War with Ogres, and you're in this situation where you can go in the Empire or go in the Darklands. That already is a good amount of variety that you have available in a campaign. But it's not these things that make this campaign so fun and so interesting. It is the diplomatic choices that you have. Yes, Greenskin diplomacy, I know, sounds shocking, but when it works, when something works, don't badmouth it, and it does freaking work in more ways than one. It's down to 2 things. One, Kislev. So the Empire hates you, really hates you. Like if you look at, if I were to go to, where is the Empire? If I were to go look at the version that the Empire does have towards me, it is minus 100 aversion. But if I look at Kislev, at Katrin, Kostaltin, even Boris Ursus, well, it's only minus 40. I can work with minus 40. In fact, I can ally Katrin within the first few turns of this campaign. Sure, she might not keep the alliance if I start declaring war on the Empire, which is, by the way, what happened, but I can always get an alliance back by taking certain territories and selling it to her. Then I can ally Kostaltin. Then I can ally Boris Ursus. There are so many choices over here in this campaign. Do I rush Festus? Do I go for Aspen? Do I go for Helpin and try and beat up Norska? Which a lot of Norska may be frozen and unsuitable, but there's also plenty of Norska that is now mountain. Yes, that is conquering Norska is a viable path for Greenskins because a lot of the capitals in particular are mountains. So The Monolith is a mountain. Doomkeep is a mountain. It's especially important for capitals to be suitable climate. The Tower of Crack is a mountain. The Forbidden Citadel is a mountain. Outside of the two coastal provinces in the north and south, all the provincial capitals are mountains. Krakadrak is a mountain. Hellpit is wasteland. There are a lot of choices you can entertain in this campaign. Do you go in Kislev and fight alongside them? Do you conquer Kislev for yourself and ally Vlad? Do you go south and ally Vlad? Do you try and ally, potentially Draika? You have so many diplomatic choices in this campaign that this is actually a high standard, not just for a Greenskin campaign, but for a campaign in general in Warhammer. I mean, certainly there are Legendary Lords that are much better in this respect with diplomacy, but just the fact that you're really breaking the mold in terms of what a campaign can be from a diplomatic standpoint is great. I mean, just having Vlad as an ally is a freaking phenomenal experience. Yes, he has a minus 40 aversion, but you can completely negate that with your faction effects. That is what makes this campaign tick. So many possibilities, so many options, so many choices. The fact you have more casters from the beginning than anyone else. Like, you get those extra Giant River Troll Hags. You can now recruit them at tier 2, so you can get 3 of them pretty quickly. You can get 2 Shamans relatively quickly once you unlock the special skill line. You start with the Shaman. Superb campaign, even if it's not as special in terms of the unique mechanic, but it just works. Like, I'll put it as plainly as possible. It just freaking works. It delivers. Like, you can have a campaign where, in one campaign you're going all the way to the coastline of Bretonia and conquering Grom, or another campaign where we're going all the way deep into freaking Cafe. That is amazing. Like, yes, I know Azhag is not the most special character, but the actual mechanics of climate, starting position, objectives, diplomacy make this campaign substantially better than many other campaigns in the game. And I think a lot more people should appreciate Azhag's campaign. Like, don't knock it until you play it a couple of times. It is a great campaign. Another fact is that you're in such a position that you're in striking distance of Skarsnik, Grimgor. You're also capable enough of getting to Gorbad. And even if you're conquering, Altdorf, going for that, because the Empire is almost certainly going to declare war on you, you don't need to go for Altdorf. You don't even need to step foot in the Empire. Just ally Catra and let her deal with it. Or maybe just go invade Osland, I suppose. And Festus, and that's enough, right? Those are probably the only things, and you can even manipulate Katrin in dealing with Osland for you. Hell, she might declare war on them on her own. She actually does in a lot of campaigns, surprisingly enough. So you're in a great position where a lot of the Legendary Lords of the Greenskins are within reach of you in a way that they aren't necessarily in other campaigns. It's not just a question of geographic position. It's also a question of climate availability and diplomacy that does make this campaign tick in a way that no other Greenskin campaign does work. I'm not saying it's the best Greenskin campaign, but I'll be blunt, I do thoroughly enjoy it, far more so than maybe I should. Maybe I should appreciate Gorbad more, I don't know. But I do like Azhag and the way it is. I think he could use some unique faction mechanics, I'm not going to say otherwise, but like, I personally do feel a campaign can be made or broken by starting positions, climate, a variety of choices that you have in a campaign, all that kind of stuff. And those choices are dictated by diplomatic options, terrain options, territory that you can conquer, and how worthwhile it is. It is worthwhile to conquer the Empire as Azhag, just as it is worthwhile to go for Zarnagrund. You can do both in this campaign. Or you can conquer, like, to give you an understanding how much territory, like how far you need to go to reach a point where there's climate that's not suitable to you, all the way into the deserts of Kemri, the western border of Bretonia, and the far east. That is an enormous portion of the campaign map that is available to you, and it makes sense to go for it. It's a great campaign from a short perspective. It's a great campaign from a long perspective. It has variety that other campaigns are so sorely lacking. And when I say variety, it's not because you can't do it in other campaigns. It's because it works just equally, just as well in this campaign as to go for the Empire as it goes for Zarnagrund. Mind you, of course, getting a tier 4 capital is its own freaking reward, and so is getting Grimgor, but, you know, you can live without that, right? Besides, allying Vlad and Catherine is its own reward in its own right. Say hello to Nagash, the true emperor of the Empire, or the person who's going to crown Vlad the Emperor. Like, it really feels like I'm actually playing Nagash in a sense, because I've got Vlad under my thumb, and yeah, I'm just helping him along. It's also interesting to deal with Karl and Elspeth ever since the Empire reworked, because, yeah, they're a bit tougher to deal with. There's some really fun fights to be had over here, and Dry Guys are just really freaking scary to deal with. But that's great. That's fun to tackle. And number 2 is Skarsnik, Warlord of Carrick Peaks. Finally, with a proper campaign in Warhammer 3. Hopefully, one day Belegar will also get a proper update to his campaign mechanics. Hopefully. We can dream, right? A man can dream. Skarsnik used to be a joke of a Legendary Lord. His campaign was never especially interesting from my perspective, and his DLC was worth purchasing more for the sake of the Nasty Skulkers as a unit than actually playing his campaign. But things have changed. Oh my, have they changed in a substantial fashion. To begin with, Squigs, and a special landmark that Skarsnik has access to fairly early in his campaign, that can give him unit mass for Squigs. Granted, I didn't get it in this campaign by this point, but it's only turned 17. But once you get this, the armies of Squigs will descend upon the world and drown it with Mangler Squigs. Especially now that CA in the recent hotfix have decided to reduce the recruitment time from 2 turns to 1. CA knows what people like, and it's Mangler Squigs. It's not Gorbad and his unique plan mechanic notes. Just a man on a pig. Or kind of pig. I'm not sure what I'd qualify a Squig as, or a Mangler Squig as. Regardless of that situation, the additions of Omens of Destruction, in particular things like Goblin Big Bosses, Mangler Squigs, and other things, do make this a better campaign. Furthermore, the fact that he now has stock stands from the beginning of his campaign really makes the playstyle that Skarsnik should have embodied actually worthwhile, because he always had this idea of like, oh, I'm an ambushing Legendary Lord, I get a bunch of benefits to ambushing, but it was never worth using it because you would have to wait for an enemy to attack you as opposed to being proactive. So that was a waste of time. But now, with stock stance and the fact you have a faction benefit that increases your ambush success chance by 15%, the downsides of stock stance are negated, and in point of fact, you can have armies with Skarsnik that go all around the campaign map just ambushing everything that moves, because you can get 15% from faction removes the downsides of stock, which has 15% less. Then you get backstairs tact, then you get a bunch of ambush benefits over here that really make it worthwhile. Then you get 15% ambush success chance, and plus 30% over here through out-clevering. Not sure if that's going to be the case in 6.02. Haven't really checked that hotfix out just yet. But it says only 6% there, but that's just level 1. I'm not sure why I can't make the tooltip show me. There we go. 30% ambush success chance. This means that Skarsnik can out-ambush the Skaven. Yes! The freaking annoying Skaven can be out-ambushed by Skarsnik. But there's more to it. Another problem for Skarsnik is that he can only recruit orcs from Carrick 8 Peaks through a landmark building over here. Well, that's been changed. You do get benefits to Night Goblins, lower recruit rank, etc. for taking Carrick 8 Peaks, and another very substantial benefit that does make this campaign better. But what they've done it so they split goblins and orcs into 2 separate barracks, and you just don't have access to the orc one until you take Carrick 8 Peaks, and you lose all barracks if you lose Carrick 8 Peaks. Though the chances of losing Carrick 8 Peaks, considering the size of its freaking garrison, pretty damn low. Also, its positioning, once you take it, it's not really that difficult to hold. Maybe an endgame crisis, possibly, but I kinda doubt that. Also, remember how I said Gorbad has a great starting position? While Skarsnik's position is safer and a bit less interesting, unless Ungrim attacks you, which he almost certainly will if he defeats Azhag. The thing about it is that you can confederate Gorbad, and you can confederate Gorbad far more easily as Skarsnik than Gorbad can confederate Skarsnik, which means you get access to Gorbad's wonderful special skill line and lord effects in this campaign. That does make it better than playing Gorbad's campaign, because you have actual faction effects to Squigs, ambush success, and you have stock stands for Skarsnik. But not just Skarsnik. Once you take Carrick 8 Peaks, you get stock stands for every single army in your campaign. I cannot express in words how insanely powerful that is, and how awesome it is to have the ambushing legendary lord in a campaign. By the way, over here I've been trying to ally Carcassol. Yes, I'm playing a bit of a diplomacy game with the dwarves. Just freaking hilarity ensues in this campaign. But it is an awesome experience. It does open up a playstyle. If for the High Elves, Alefanar is a great campaign because he has that stock stance to all his armies from the beginning, Skarsnik may take a while to get that access to that, but then he basically becomes the Alefanar of the Greenskins. And in some ways he's actually better than Alefanar because he can ambush better than Alefanar, or at least he can ambush better with other armies. Not necessarily the main one, but with the secondary, tertiary armies, he can probably do a better job. Also, Squig ambushing is freaking hilarious. Mangler Squigs are freaking hilarious. There's not much more to say than that. Like, they did a couple of small things, like changing the barracks so you can actually get orcs from other settlements other than just Carrick 8 Peaks. Giving you stock stands. These are not necessarily hard things to do, I imagine. I don't know, like, I'm not the developer, but I imagine, modders probably could have done this. But it just shows you how a couple of simple, relatively small changes can make such a dramatic impact on a campaign. It could use a bit of an update on the Lord skills, especially Underboss is a waste of a skill point. Don't ever get it, because you don't want to steal experience earned by other Lords, because it's actually genuinely a downside. What's the point of Mentor if you're stealing experience from other Lords, right? Granted, you do gain 100 more character experience for heroes, but not Lords, so... yeah, I mean, I guess you could get Gorbad, maybe make it work, a combination of Gorbad's special skill line and Mentor could remove the downside of all of it, but it's just not really worth it. You don't want to recruit Goblin Big Bosses, well, Goblin Big Bosses, yes, but just recruit them from a regular settlement, easy enough to do so. As for Night Goblin Shamans, get regular shamans, they're just flat out better. If you want Night Goblin Shaman magic, just get Goblin Great Shamans as Lord, have them follow your main armies around, it's a better choice. Or just recruit the Savage Orc Great Shaman, just much better magical choice as a Lord, from my point of view. So you get an improvement to the unique playstyle that Skarsnik should have had probably for years now. You get a genuine, really good reward for taking Carrick 8 Peaks. You can get Gorbad. It is a much better campaign than it was. Whereas before this was one of the worst campaigns in the game, it has certainly shot up by quite a lot. It's still not number one, though, from my perspective. And finally, at number one is Grimgor. Grimgor is not so much of a legendary lord as he is a force of nature, and that is not really a joke. When I play campaigns in Warhammer 3, there are very, very few things that make me hesitate. But I don't just hesitate with Grimgor, I am freaking terrified of Grimgor. Whenever I play any campaign in this specific area, I know I will likely have to deal with him one way or another. Maybe if I get very, very lucky, Tamarkan deals with him, but all Tamarkan can do most of the time is just contain him. He can't stop him, not fully. And that should give you an idea about Grimgor. He is so freaking scary in battle that the best strategy you have when you're facing his army in battle is to try and have him chase around some unit or on the battlefield while you win the rest of your battle. Without him being engaged. Because if he becomes engaged, you're going to have a hell of a freaking time winning that battle. Just look at the many battles Legend of Total War has done on this subject. is crazy. It's also crazy when you consider that you can get 3 Black Orc big bosses on turn 1, and then he can upgrade that to 5. He's kind of like the Alariel of the Greenskins. Alariel being really special for High Elves because she gets more handmaidens than anyone else. Well, Grimgor gets more Black Orc big bosses than anyone else. And look, I understand. For some people, sneaky, strategy, planning, all that is important. For me, when it comes to Greenskins specifically, not other races, but when it comes to Greenskins, what I think about Greenskins from a thematic standpoint, I think about a race of green brutes, an unstoppable tide of death and destruction. Forget diplomacy and stalking and ambushing and the plan and magic. Who needs all of that? You're Grimgor, the strongest duelist in this game, probably by far in a lot of ways. Yes, some others may become more powerful, especially with regeneration, but Grimgor, he's a freaking force of nature. In fact, in the end times, it took Archaon with Skulltaker in his sword, potentially. We don't know who exactly is in that sword. Speculation is that it is Skulltaker. Maybe. Depends on how you want to view that. But regardless, it took Archaon with a special demon sword, fully empowered by the Chaos Gods, to kill him. That is Grimgor, a force of nature, a tide of death and destruction that will leave no survivors in his wake. He doesn't need terrain variety or diplomacy or ambushing or any of that nonsense. He just marches on Zarnagrud within the first few turns and demolishes it all to the ground, or makes it his capital and then starts recruiting Black Orcs very quickly in his campaign. Also, the fact that you have the Black Orc Big Fort over here, that gives you an extra Black Orc Big Boss capacity, as well as various recruitment benefits, including local recruitment duration for Black Orcs, makes this playstyle incredibly good. Also, his special upgrade over here for the Immortal's armor, combined with the scrap upgrade that CA implemented in Omens of Destruction, where you can just stack these, gives Grimgor an insanely powerful melee army that can go toe-to-toe against pretty much any other melee unit in the game with all these upgrades. That is crazy. Like, when these guys can go up to, fight Chosen, that is ridiculous. And I'm not talking about Chosen of Khorne. No. We're talking about Chosen of Nurgle, fully upgraded Chosen of Nurgle, and potentially win. That is ridiculously good. And very thematic. That is why I think this campaign is great. It is a very thematic Greenskin campaign. Other campaigns may not necessarily fit the bill. They can be good campaigns. They can be great campaigns. They can work very well from a gameplay perspective. But are they thematic? In some cases, it's less than ideal. With Grimgor, what you read about him in the lore is what you get in the game. A big green brute that's going to destroy everything in his path. The only question you have with Grimgor is who's going to be your first victim. That's it. Are you going to risk it all on Zarnagrund to destroy the Cast Dwarves? Are you going to march against Kolek and Tamarkan? Or are you going to beat up Archaon? You can do so, sure. The climate may not be suitable, but hey, there's a landmark over here that reduces your upkeep for Goblin units by minus 15% and gives you 5 armor piercing damage when fighting Cast Dwarves. Yes, Grimgor is ridiculous. Like, even as legendary lords like Arbol or Skulltaker or other very powerful legendary lords, I always do hesitate a bit when dealing with Grimgor, because I know regardless of the army I'm going to bring, unless I have a super duper endgame army and he's just got like regular orc units, orc boys, and even then if he has a Wa attached to it and I only bring one army, I know it's still going to be a battle. It may not necessarily be a very long battle, but it's at least going to be a battle as opposed to just a cakewalk. And that's something to be said about the Legendary Lord, when they are genuinely freaking terrifying to deal with in a campaign, and when you can unleash that terror upon your enemies. Costin signing out. Stay tuned for more.